This is
Okay.
not live. We do record it and then it's published after the interview, but it's not. But we are recording.
Okay, sounds good.
So this is Fam Electric Ghost. We interview indie musicians around the world since 2018, and today we have Baddcheeta, and you are a LA-based vocalist, songwriter, and DJ and producer, and you do deep electronic pop type music. And we're gonna talk to you for the next several minutes, probably up to an hour if you want to. So how are you tonight?
I am doing well. I'm staying home. It was raining yesterday in LA, a little bit better today, so it was nice. I walked my dog a little bit this morning, so it feels great to see the sun again.
Yeah, we're in New Hampshire. We're kind of locked down.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
we've got like a bad COVID rate. We were doing pretty. We're not doing so good, so everybody's kind of like been kind of stuck. But that's
Mm-hmm.
fine for me because I'm an electronic musician on my studio.
Nice,
So,
nice. That's
yeah,
awesome.
so I can pretty much create anytime I want, so it's not a big problem. But and I do the podcast, and it doesn't really matter where I am. But
Mm-hmm.
so I sent you a list of questions that we always go through,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll talk about your bio as we go through the list of questions. But I always like to talk to the artist I talk to about like when did they first get into music, and like what age did you decide that you liked music and it became something that was really important to you.
Mm. I think it was around 5 years old when my mom kind of realized that I really like to sing and I really just, like music. So she made me take some vocal lessons, some voice lessons, and some piano lessons. And then I just remember when I was in kindergarten, like my teacher would ask me to be like sort of like the class conductor, when we would sing. Like she would
Mm-hmm.
just put me in front of everyone and kind of lead. And then all throughout elementary school and high school, I just kind of never stopped, singing and playing instruments. I was always in choir, and I had a best friend who I started a band with when I was in high school, and just never kind of lost interest in it. I always, and also being Filipino, it was just really big in our culture, so
Mm-hmm.
it was just
Yeah,
kind of always around.
I think it's like African Americans. We have music as kind of like part of us. You know, my grandpa played a banjo in Appalachia. He was a coal miner,
Oh,
and he
nice.
could like pick up anything. He could pick up
Right.
like accordion. He could do a banjo. He could do a flute. He could kind of like
Mm-hmm.
Appalachian hillbilly type of thing. It was like
Mm-hmm.
this heavy kind of Americana music.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson and all that kind of stuff. But it had this kind of soul
Nice.
to it, and
Right. Yeah.
it was like that's all I always got into it because a lot of my relatives they could just pick up instruments, and
Right.
I found out that I gravitated to piano. My brother picked up a Fender, and then boom, he just could play it. It didn't
Yeah.
take him that long. He just read a couple chord books, and then
Right.
boom, he could play it. I would say I just jumped on a piano, and I started just being able to figure it out, and
Mm-hmm.
it just seems like something that's just like I started early age too by like 7.
Nice.
Going between a clarinet and a piano and organs and stuff.
Wow.
And I think it's just I gravitate toward music. Other people gravitate toward like other types of art. But
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting. You talk about you actually played guitar in a band, a duo called the Dovetails, right?
Yes, but before that, I played in high school with, just my best friends. Like you said, like my
Mm-hmm.
best friend, like her dad was a musician in Hong Kong, so she was always around music too. Um, but I was always like, I played guitar since I was 11, and so I had a band and I was singing for them, and I was also playing guitar. But here in the US, we started a duo, a friend of mine and me, and it was called the Dovetails. So like you, we were also playing like some Americana, and we would play like at dive bars, at casinos, at weddings.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of just for fun until, the casino just kind of started paying us a little bit of money. So we were doing it like on the weekends for like almost a year. And Yeah, it
Uh,
was really fun,
cool.
but until, you just, I think musicians, the hardest part about having bands and playing with people is, the schedule clashing and, if someone decides to move far away, then,
Yeah, well,
um,
people get married. What happened to all my bands is all the guys got
right,
married.
exactly. So, it's
And then suddenly their girlfriends or their wives are like, stop doing that foolishness called music.
I'm so familiar with that. And that's also kind of like one of the reasons why I gravitated towards DJing and producing because
Hmm.
I was able, like, it enabled me to kind of, move by myself and kind of take it anywhere with me and not have to rely so much on other people if whether they were available, because
Yeah,
the most fun thing about music is when you get to play with people. And so when that element was getting harder to kind of create, like having people with you, I think I found a lot of solace with electronic music and production.
that's interesting because like I had been in bands. I started with like rock bands,
Hmm.
then kind of gravitated toward punk
Hmm.
rock and then new wave.
Nice.
Because I'm in my
Oh,
50s,
nice.
so I grew up in the
Yeah.
70s, right? With people, I used to listen to Led Zeppelin on vinyl because it actually was on vinyl.
Wow. Yeah.
So then when I was big into heavy metal and Hendrix, and then suddenly like the Clash and the Sex Pistols showed up,
Hmm.
and then like the Ramones, and then like wow, that you don't have to be Jimmy Page, you don't have to be Hendrix, you don't have to be
Right.
that that much of a technical player.
Hmm.
And then I was like, but I was a keyboard player, so I appreciated like the Doors, and I appreciated the Allman Brothers, and funk, which actually is kind of difficult to
Hmm.
play. So, but I like the idea of punk because it made it kind of free,
Right. Right. You
um,
weren't so.
and it had a lot
Mhm.
of yeah. It was honesty, I
Right.
think, what I liked about it. And then it made more people interested, so you could find more people who would want to join your
Hmm.
band. You know, kids who used to think it was silly or stupid, suddenly they thought it was cool, and then you could actually build a lot of bands. But
Hmm.
people started kind of pairing off, and I like, well, I was in the sense, and I said, well, this is awesome because I watched a band like New Order and The Cure
Nice.
and Depeche Mode, and they're like, you can do a lot with these
Right.
synthesizers. And I started picking up Rolands and Modes and Hammond B3s, and I was like, oh, I can just get sequencers and I can just build all this stuff by
Hmm.
myself.
Yeah.
And I started going in that direction, and I've been in that kind of direction. I kind of had people come into the Ghost a couple of times as guitar players or drummers or things,
Mm.
or I collaborate with people, but a lot of times it's just me. Um, and it just works out in this world because like now today I'm not stopped
Hmm.
by this situation because I've been doing this for a
Right.
while,
Right.
and I can keep on putting out music because it doesn't really
Hmm.
matter.
That's very true.
I don't have to connect with anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think that's what's happening now. Like, with like developments in technology, and you can pretty much be your own record label and record producer and do everything kind of yourself. You're not like confined to all the gatekeepers that used to have the equipment and have all the resources to kind of put you out there. You can do all that yourself, literally.
What's cool about being into the DAW
Mhm.
in the DJ
Mhm.
world is I can see you collaborate with other producers and other
Mhm.
musicians. And the cool thing about when you're on a DAW, you can just send somebody a file.
Exactly. It doesn't
Right?
even matter where
You,
they are.
you
Yeah.
can, yeah. I mean, I did a whole collaboration in
Mhm.
2017 with an
Oh,
actress
nice.
from Los
Cool.
Angeles, and we never met. Everything was on Skype calls. It was kind of
Mhm.
pre-COVID, right? We would we never met, but we kind of vibed together. We met on Instagram. She
Mhm.
liked what I was doing. I liked what she was doing. We ended up doing a full record
That's
together. She was
awesome.
an actress. She does films but she was into like
Mhm.
EDM. And so I said, well, I'm into like progressive electronic and funk. And so we kind of did something. I used hardware recorders and she used FL Studio.
Nice.
And we kind of merged the files together and we worked on a project. And it was kind of like, well, you can do that. And I've continued to do collaborations
Mhm.
like that. I just did one with a spoken word poet from like Toronto.
Wow.
But you can just, people have to not put the limitations on
Mhm.
themselves. I know there's people who like to physically go to
Right.
the studio, like to sit there with the other
Mhm.
musicians. drummers have a hard time today because they really want to
Right.
be in a
Right.
group, but you've got to find ways to connect.
Mm-hmm.
In some musicians, it's harder. Like if you're a drummer, you're kind of stuck.
Right.
And drummers are kind of that's a talent that's supposed to be played with other people.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard not to do that by yourself. But
Right.
yeah, it's some things you have to get into, maybe more production oriented stuff. But
Right.
it's interesting that you've been able to work on some of the songs I was listening to for
Mm-hmm.
2020, like
Oahu,
Oahu,
yeah.
uh, yeah, and Bloom,
Uh-huh.
and
Uh-huh.
E11, and Vintage the Bass. I really like
Oh
Vintage the
yeah,
Bass.
that.
I
Mm-hmm.
that one I
Oh
really like a
yeah,
lot.
I collaborated with a duo, an electronic duo. One it lives here in LA, and one is in San Diego. And I actually met them through Instagram. They just sent me a message and they said,
That's
"We'd
cool.
like to,
They
yeah,
got
we'd like to have you work with us." And at first, I'm like, "Oh, I didn't really take it seriously. I didn't think that they were actually gonna do it. Like you,
do it.
I mean, like other people, I just wasn't, sure how it was gonna play out, because I was so new to collaborating with electronic music artists that I wasn't sure how it was all
Mm-hmm.
gonna go down. But they said, "Oh yeah, we have a studio that we work in," and I said, I was a little nervous at first, but I said, you know what, I'm just gonna go for it. Like, what have I got to lose?
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out to be a really cool studio in Hollywood, really professional. And my sound engineer, Lucky, he's been doing it for a really long time. And I think they were sort of like rappers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they were playing instruments, but I think they were rapper producers. And then now he does music for movies and commercials, I believe, for TV. But so he
Yeah, that's a big thing in electronic.
right, yeah,
That's where you want to go
I
now if you can't
agree.
tour. If you can't get, you want
Hmm.
to do, you got to do the sync
Right, you
licensing.
got to get creative with everything now because you
Yeah,
just you
yeah.
never know. But being music, like it's sort of like COVID proof, like you said. You can kind of like work from home and you can collaborate with so many people just from being in one
That
place.
song has a really good groove. I
Visage.
like your lyrics are just really, yeah, it's very funky and it's kind of, it's a little
Yeah.
naughty and it's cool. I like it because it's got this, like, I'm big into a band called
Okay.
Funkadelic with had George Clinton. And Funkadelic used to mix a
Right.
lot of like funk and like they would have like very sensual
Mm-hmm.
stuff going on. But it was just kind of it was all kind of not it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't disco, it was
Right.
funk.
Yeah.
And this has got a kind of funk beat, but it's got that
Right.
EDM feel, but it's got the funk in it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that, because that's kind of I love like heavy Moog beats and really good
Yeah.
bass lines, and that really
Right.
triggers. But then Oahu is more like synthwave. It's
Mm-hmm.
very
Right.
cinematic. I like that
Yeah.
kind of feel too because I like pads. I like synth pads like polyphonic synths like
Mm.
Jupiter 8s and DX7s and Moogs. That I love that sound. And some of your songs, it's really interesting in 2020 between like Oahu and
Mm-hmm.
E11, and you've got like different types of electronic
Yeah.
music. Yeah, and it's cool because you're not because some people are just in the
One
kind of
thing.
one
Yeah.
zone, one
Yeah.
lane.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to merge because you work with other
Mm-hmm.
people and you've got different vibes
Definitely.
going on. That your music is really cool. And I think it's cool to be
Thank you.
diverse,
Yeah. Well, I
in your
mean,
sound.
growing up, like I had so many, cousins that listen, and my parents too, that listen to a lot of different types of music. So I don't think I was ever, and my brother, he was really into heavy metal. So I think it was just
Hmm.
kind of just taking all of those influences and not being confined to one because I think I don't see myself really being I think when it comes to I guess marketing and all these things it's easier to market yourself if you're just like one thing because maybe
Yeah, yeah,
people
yeah.
know what to expect and you know what to do but
Your agent knows how to book you. Yeah,
exactly.
your agents like want it to be simple. If they say, "Wait," you tell them like I do every
Oh,
genre, and like they start
right,
scratching their
where do
head.
we
They're like,
put
"What?
you?
Where am I going to
Right,
book you?"
exactly. So, I mean, it's a struggle, but also I think that's what makes it more fun. And, I've always just
Yeah,
kind of, I see music as this fun thing. It's almost like therapy for me. So I never,
that's
yeah,
interesting. Yeah, singer-songwriters, when I talk to
Hmm.
singer-songwriters, they often say that in the last
Yeah,
3 years. Most songwriters tell me that it's
it
like cathartic,
is.
that it's like going to the counselor and like going to their therapist if they had
Right.
one. But they use music to, when you think all
Hmm.
artists do this,
Hmm.
painters do it, actors do it. They can channel things
Hmm.
that happen in their lives into
100%.
art.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I think that's the thing about being a creative person,
Right.
like how you
I
do that.
agree. I think like, how I approach music is it's all through like just my experiences, and it's all through the vibes. And I feel like artists, they're like this portal from, I don't know, another world where, they take in what's on earth, and then it kind of goes through them and it comes out as,
Yeah, you
right.
channel it. Like a lot of people say that like the whole like Victorian
Mm-hmm.
poets used to talk about
Mm-hmm.
the muse, like
Mm-hmm.
MUSE, and the muse was this idea like all the big poets like Wordsworth and Blake and Tennyson, they all talked
Mm-hmm.
about this muse, and basically it's that idea that this universal thing you tap into,
Right.
and poets would call it
Mm-hmm.
the muse. You can call it this universal thing. Even the guy that
Mm-hmm.
invented the Moog, when you buy a Moog and you
Mm-hmm.
get the manual, he has this statement that says that he thinks he tapped into some
Mm-hmm.
universal thing when he built the
Right,
Moog.
right.
That he felt like, as even an inventor, he felt like he tapped into something when he created that
Wow.
instrument that opened up this whole new world. And it's like, that's really cool because like the guy who built
Mm-hmm.
it actually has the same vibe
Right.
as the people who play his instrument.
Yeah, honestly, like when I use Ableton, like the DAW that I use, when I first learned about it, I felt like I was, like I jumped in a spaceship and I was learning how to, kind of
Yeah.
work it. And then as the days went by, I felt like, the more that I knew about it, the more I could create with it, I felt like I was taking off like to space and taking people with me, you know?
That's the interesting thing about music, like whether or not you're using like a soft synth in Ableton
Mm-hmm.
or using main stage or Pro Tools, it's all the same thing. The
Mm-hmm.
synthesizers, like I'm a hardware guy, right? So I have like Moves and Rollins and
Okay.
Yamahas. I have the physical synths
Wow.
because that's kind of where I came from. I'm in my
Mm-hmm.
50s, so I collected them, and
Wow.
they feel like guitars to me. Like if you get
Right.
classic synths like Rollins and Moogs and
Mm-hmm.
Hammond organs, they feel like authentic, right? And so
Right.
when you craft like kind of music with those type of instruments, you get a different vibe. Like if is because I use these type of instruments, and that's
Mm.
why I sound the way I do.
You
And
physically use them.
yeah, yeah, physical synthesizers that
Mm-hmm.
do produce a different type of sound
Right.
than what you can get because it's just they're kind of like living things.
Right. Right.
Every synth I have has a different character,
That's
and
awesome.
it's just, and that's why you kind of do it because I get close. I think I've talked to guitar players and horn players,
Mm-hmm.
sax players, like jazz guys. They get really into that, like a relationship with their instrument. And
Totally.
they have it like they're tied to it.
Mm-hmm.
And they feel it, and the instrument kind of goes with them. And that's the cool thing about music, that
Mm-hmm.
whether you're using like if you key in, like you keyed into Ableton, you started to feel it, right? You
Mm-hmm.
started to create, and I think musician or artist producer feels their instrument, and figures out how to communicate with their audience with.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's almost like an extension of yourself after
After a while.
spending the more time you spend with the instrument, the more connection you can build with it, and the more sort of you can connect with other people with it too. But definitely I feel you on that, where it's almost like a relationship that you have, because ever since I started learning Ableton, I just I haven't lost interest in it. I just want to like keep doing it.
Yeah, it's interesting because like every time I was I always wanted to play guitar,
Oh,
and
really?
I never could do it, but I was good at the keyboard. And the funny thing is,
Right.
my brother could just naturally play guitar, but I couldn't. And
Right.
then he was like, "Well, I can't play the keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
You can play it."
Hmm.
And so he's like, "Okay, well, we just deal with the fact that like I'm not great on the guitar. I tried it, I really can't get it, but I really geared toward keyboards." And then I always figured out I wanted to like learn how to make my synths sound like guitars. So I spent a
Mm.
lot of time doing a lot of stuff with my synths to make them sound like guitars since I couldn't play
Mm.
guitar.
Mm.
And so I found ways to make them sound like, heavy metal guitars and like Hendrixian stuff. And it's just, my frustration is like I couldn't do it, but I found another way to do it.
Right. That's also how I feel with Ableton. And also, I think, I think there was like a blockage when I was growing up. I don't know why, but we grew up like just playing other people's songs. So I never really bothered kind of like making my own or writing my own, but it was such a pleasure just being able to play. And then,
Yeah.
but when I discovered Ableton, I'm like, I kind of like the blockage kind of went away. And I'm like, you know what? I think I'm gonna shoot my shot and just kind of like make my own and see what happens. And then, when I saw that I was able to do that, wow, it was like a whole new chapter just
So when did that
open.
happen? When did you actually, because that's one of our questions. Like when
Yeah.
a lot of people are musicians, right? And they become classical musicians or studio
Hmm.
musicians, and they don't write their own stuff. They
Right.
might participate and
Hmm.
help, they craft things. If you're a studio musician, you might play other people's stuff, but you bring your
Hmm.
own feel to it.
Right.
But what makes you change to where, I have the confidence, or I have the ideas, or I believe in my idea
Yeah.
enough that I'm going to write my own.
Yeah.
It's a kind of a big step as a
I
musician
think so.
to
Yeah.
do that.
I
When did that
think
happen for you?
I think it happened for me about 2 years ago. First, when I took a class to learn Ableton, I just knew in my head I could do it. And then the funny thing is, I got the confidence. It's not even really for music. Well, maybe partly, but a lot of it too is because I used to listen. Well, I still do. I listen to a lot of like comedy podcasts because
Hmm.
there's a lot of stand-up comedy here in LA, and
Yeah, it's a good place for it.
yeah, I listen to a lot of comics, and I just, when I hear them just talk so freely and so, they just don't care, it kind of,
You got confidence from their performance.
yeah, I'm like, you know what? If they can say whatever they want and, they feel great about it and they're very inspiring. They talk about like where they came from and what the struggles that they go through. And I found myself relating to a lot of it in my own way. And so they were very inspiring in how they just encourage you. If you're an artist, you just have to go through it, even if it sucks, some days, they
Yeah.
were saying, we go to 300 auditions and get picked like twice. It's like you just have to keep going. You just have to look at failure as part of the journey, and you have to embrace that. And I think it just clicked with me. Like I'm like, oh yeah, there's nothing wrong with failing. Even when I was playing guitar growing up, like even if I couldn't play a chord, today, I could probably be able to play it like next week, but it's all about like just trial and error, trial and error. And then I guess I got rid of that blockage and just, kind of just believed in myself. And next thing I know, I'm actually finishing songs and wanting to do more. And that was it. But I think really comedy and hearing other people kind of, explain their journey and failures just gave me the confidence to, go for it myself.
But I think it's also the fact is like a lot of times when you're a musician, like if you're a classical musician, you're doing Bach and
Right.
Beethoven and Chopin, you're doing all that stuff,
Hmm.
right? And you're kind of like in this heady space where I can never be Beethoven, I can never be
Exactly.
Chopin,
Yeah.
right? And you're in the same kind of things. Like I can't be Mariah Carey, I
Right.
can't be Whitney Houston, right? I can't be
Right.
Jimmy Page, I can't be Hendrix. So that stopped a lot of people
Exactly. Like,
because they're
who am
like,
I?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have to kind of
Mm-hmm.
realize, like, one thing I think about the punk
Mm-hmm.
movement was, Johnny Rotten just got up there and he just did it. Joe Strummer from the Clash, he
Right.
just did it.
Right.
And then, like, Joey Ramone from Ramones, he just came up there and did it. And, Dave Burns from the Talking Heads, he just went up there and did it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, you know what? That was the inspiration to me, was like punk,
Mm-hmm.
was that there are people that can come up there and be honest. Even like a Bob
Mm-hmm.
Dylan. Like, Bob Dylan's like one of the greatest lyricists ever, but his voice is not pitch perfect.
Right.
It's not the most beautiful voice, but he says very beautiful
Mm-hmm.
things. And you don't have to have a 5-octave voice
I
or a pitch
agree.
perfect
Mm-hmm.
voice. If you can say something that means
Right.
something and you believe in
Mm-hmm.
it, and you believe in your work, you don't have to be the best guitar player, but the fact that you wrote the
Right.
song, that's the heart of being a singer-songwriter, is that you can convey that story in the only way that you
Mm-hmm.
could, because it's your story.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think that's what makes independent music good, is that you don't have to try to be Frank
Right.
Sinatra. You don't have
Mm-hmm.
to be Nat King Cole. You're not trying to
Mm-hmm.
be that. You're just being you.
Yeah,
You know?
100%. I think so too. And there's definitely like beauty in all of that. Like, and also keep in mind that all those, big artists that you name, they also have like a lot of, like a whole team of people kind of, you know, telling them how to be and kind of building their whole image and doing a lot of things for them. So I think they're just
Yeah.
held to such a pedestal, but we're not really exposed to all the work that other people do for them in order to get them kind of to that level.
Yeah. I mean, the professional top tier
Mm-hmm.
artists, they're in this totally different
Right.
tier. You know, they get the full support. They got the
Mm-hmm.
roadies. They got their entourage. They got the planes. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
totally different level than the like working musician.
Mm-hmm.
That it's a working thing, and it's a passion. It's like a lot of musicians I talk to at this level
Mm-hmm.
for this podcast
Mm-hmm.
are all independent, usually musicians. Some of them are on
Mm-hmm.
labels, but they're on very small
Mm-hmm.
labels. And it's just I like to talk to people in this zone
Mm-hmm.
because I think that's where all the new stuff
I
is happening.
agree. I agree. When I go on SoundCloud, I don't even sometimes I don't really even know. Sometimes I'll forget their names but I'll go on this really, deep rabbit hole of just like underground searching for underground music and just nonstop,
Yeah,
because that's where all the new stuff is, like stuff you will never hear on the radio, stuff you won't ever read about.
yeah, stuff you hear the Whiskey a Go Go and like
Right.
in New York the CBGBs,
Mm-hmm.
right? CBGBs, like if you wanted to see something cool, you go to CBGBs and you see like Blondie or the Ramones before they were famous, right? You get to
Right.
see these
Exactly.
people that were doing like new wave before new wave was big, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you saw early version of the Talking Heads, or you saw the early versions of the
Mm-hmm.
Ramones, before they were big,
Right.
and that's the kind. I grew up with college radio, which was kind of before the
Right.
internet. If you wanted to hear something cool, you'd listen to your local college
Mm-hmm.
station, and they would play all this stuff like REM.
Nice.
Like
It
before
was
REM was
even big.
big, they
Yeah.
were a college.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were a college radio band on a really small label called IRS, and all
Mm-hmm.
these college DJs. I used to live near UMass, and these Amherst UMass
Mm-hmm.
DJs would play like REM, and they'd play the Talking Head, and they'd play all this stuff that you didn't hear on the
That's
radio.
awesome.
And I'm like, what is this stuff? And then like MTV came, right? And
Right.
then there's like, whoa, now I get videos to go with these faces.
Yeah.
And then there's like all this stuff that you still didn't hear on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wow, this is cool. And that was revolutionary because you suddenly got exposed to all these bands you
Right.
would have never got exposed
Right. Right. Right.
to. And today, we get that on the net through Instagram and social media. That's how I found you. I think it's really cool
Mm-hmm.
that there's this alternative media that you don't have to listen to the radio. You don't have to.
Yeah.
You can go and go outside the radio programmers and find what interests you
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
as a listener.
For sure. I think I really, really like Spotify's playlisting and algorithm where you can
Yeah,
just,
you'll find stuff good.
yeah, you could just like click, listen to a song you like and then click on start radio, like, and then it just recommends all these or it lists out all these other similar songs or the similar vibe, and
Yeah,
I discover so many artists I would never have known about had it not been for that.
it'll push like a lot of. I don't know, because my playlist I tend to listen to a lot of indie stuff. It keeps on sending me all these indie
Oh,
bands,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
So I'm always like listening to like Television
Mm-hmm.
or Joy Division, or all these like early '80s new romantic bands from like '78 and
Nice.
'79,
Nice.
and they would just I'm a synth player, so I'm really interested in kind of that new wave
Mm-hmm.
sound where it started,
Mm.
with the early bands that did it from like you get into bands like
Oh,
Kraftwerk
yeah,
in
yeah,
Germany.
yeah.
They were like the first like synth band,
Mm-hmm.
out of
Mm-hmm.
Berlin. And then all these other guys started getting into it in '78 and '79 with like bands like Joy Division, which became New Order.
Mm-hmm.
and then New Order kind of inspired bands like Depeche Mode and, Duran Duran's of the world. It just created this whole different vibe that you can take these synthesizers and create this whole vibe that now has become electronic music with DJs and all Ableton and all these DAWs.
Yeah.
But back then it was like, okay, you had a Jupiter 8, you had a DX7, and you had these Oberheims. You had this sound that, like, wow, this is different. This is a different type of thing. And it just, it still inspires me today. There's still a lot, well, now it's become synthwave, or different types of electronic, glitch pop and all kinds of weird stuff that I'm into.
I really like
even this new thing, like Dirge electronic.
What is that?
Which is like it's lower than 60 BPM.
Oh, okay.
So like stuff I've been doing is very slow BPM. Out of space, because you're not running like 160 or 180. You're doing like less than 60 BPM. Which when you go that slow, then every note kind of rings out and you hear all this space, and you can get into deeper things because you're kind of doing, like, in music, it's kind of dirge, it's like a funeral march. So it's kind of like a sad thing, but then you can put things into it that you can go in deeper places because you're going slower.
Okay.
And because you're going slower, then it ends up being very meaningful when you do hit the notes. You have a lot more space between them.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a different type of thing,
But that's the good thing about electronic music. I think, we're always kind of just looking for, different sounds to experiment with. Like one of our songs that we just released, that I released with Evil Rocket Ship, he told me that he was using some sounds from the Transformers. I think he was using...
Oh, he sampled like Transformers?
Yeah, he was using some sound effects from that. So I'm like, oh wow, no wonder they sounded really just different.
Well, I love sampling, like this thing called granular synthesis, where you sample. Like you do like field recordings, and you grab, like, some people will go grab like birds or the sound of a forest.
Yeah, I think that's what the Beatles...
Yeah, they did that.
Yeah.
George Martin was big into that. Like the Beatles. A lot of people say, "Oh, why do you quote the Beatles?" Well, because Sgt. Pepper's and Abbey Road are kind of why pop music is the way it is. Because the layering that we do in Ableton and all these DAWs, George Martin is the beginning of that. George Martin and the Beatles, they did the layering that created that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the being able to multi-track recordings that we have today, most bands didn't do that. George Martin, the story behind him is that he actually did Peter Sellers' comedy records. So it's interesting you talk about comics. But George Martin learned how to do multi-track recordings because he used to do Peter Sellers' comedy records in the late 50s. Oh. And those comedy records used to have multi-tracks of all kinds of sound effects, backward tape loops, orchestras. They were very layered. Yeah. And it was interesting that the Beatles actually were fans of Peter Sellers. And when they got George Martin as a producer, they said, hey, can we do some of that Peter Sellers stuff? And that's how they got to Sgt. Pepper's, because they had a guy that knew how to do that kind of multi-track experimentation as a studio, as an instrument. And then that's why we have today this kind of ability to kind of go anywhere we want to with these DAWs or multi-track recordings. Yeah. It gives you the ability to kind of layer your world. Yeah. And create like a sound painting. What I call them sound paintings.
Yeah, in electronic music, they'll just take out like a saying from a movie or something and just create like a drop around that.
Yeah, you can just layer anything. You can grab a sample, do a clip, put it into I do some samples that have this thing allows me to do what they call splices and genes. Yeah. It breaks the sample down, and then you can kind of do time warping. So you can take like the first 30 seconds of a song and then take the last 120 seconds and make it happen at the same time. And then you can make all kinds of strangeness happen, because you can take any moment in time and make it cross happen at the same time. And you can have things go backwards and forwards at the same time. And it creates a lot of layering and a lot of unique opportunities where you're like, okay, well, I can take this beat and like warp it and then change it to something I didn't even anticipate. Right. And I think that's what's cool about electronic music, where people
Yeah.
really like it. So you get very strange
Mm-hmm.
sounds that you haven't been heard,
Mm-hmm.
or beats that you maybe didn't think you could do. You kind of make these glitchy
Yeah.
in time,
Right.
and I think that's what the whole kind of excitement
Yeah.
about electronic music
I
is, that
agree.
you can do this, you
I
know.
totally agree. Like, I mean, I love just, playing guitar and singing, but the whole electronic music scene just changed everything for me. I think it just added so much more fascination for music. I just feel like now I will never be bored, because I have music to play with, like on the computer, and I can create with anybody literally whenever I want.
Have you thought of like bringing some of your guitar
Yeah,
into electronic?
yeah.
Because I like it when
Mm-hmm.
people actually
Combine.
take like a real guitar or like a
Yeah.
horn or like a acoustic instrument and then bring it
Mm-hmm.
into electronic live.
Totally,
Because then
totally.
you can do some stuff that's really cool, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I also know some instrumentalists like guitarists and even like a sax player where I can definitely, just create like a beat or something, put some synths in it and sing a little bit, and then he can just kind of enter with his little, he can just,
Yeah,
improvise with
it's cool.
an ad lib or something. But yeah, it's,
Yeah, it's always good.
mm-hmm.
So do you like playing live? Um, when you have you played a lot of live gigs with like, or are you like working as a DJ and you just run it and then sing over your
I
tracks?
haven't done that.
Or do you actually have like a full band
I
or something?
used to, I mean, the only experience I have playing with electronic music live is through DJing. Like, I haven't experimented yet with Ableton Live and, singing while DJing and, doing all that yet. But when I used to play live, it would just also just be with my guitar and with a band, honestly, and singing. I've,
Well, that is like the traditional way to do
mhm,
it, and it's probably like the more authentic way to do it. But
r-
nowadays, because of the technology,
right.
if you come out with an MPC or you have your
Mm-hmm.
Novation, right, you can have your grid based
Mm-hmm.
system, and you can do live performance. For me, what I did in 2017, I used to take all my synths and do like a one
Oh,
person
nice.
band with all my sequencers and my hardware synths, and I would go to New York, go into these clubs,
Nice.
and be able to show that one person can play a
Mm-hmm.
gig all by themselves with all these
Yeah,
synths.
that sounds
And so I
awesome.
kind of come in kind of like an '80s type of thing, but just have a big stack of synths and then have a lot of stuff going on where you do two hands on two different synths and all these drum machines and sequencers going.
Mm-hmm.
And it was cool because you could, when if you get crazy with these synths, you can play a live gig, you can mute and unmute
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So it's the same idea. Like if you had Ableton, you can like mute and unmute
Mm-hmm.
tracks. So you could unmute the vocal and then sing with your
Mm,
track.
yeah.
You could like, and then you could, if you're a musician, like you want to play that bass line
Mm-hmm.
on a
Mm-hmm.
keyboard, you could play the bass line and
Mm-hmm.
sing it, and have the rest of the stuff
Mm-hmm.
unmuted. And so it allows you to do all kinds of cool stuff. And depends on what you want to do that night. Well,
Right.
I'll mute the bass or unmute the bass. I'll do the lead. Maybe I won't do the lead. Maybe I'll play the
Mm-hmm.
drums. Maybe I'll do the. You can kind of just do whatever you want, and it still gives you the spontaneity to kind of do a performance where it doesn't feel like you're just running to like a beat and not doing anything. You could
Right.
actually, if you're a
Mm-hmm.
musician and you know how to do it, you can actually integrate with
Mm-hmm.
yourself,
I agree.
with your own
Yeah.
track.
Yeah, that's definitely
Just,
on
just
my bucket list. I definitely want to be able to do that because that's also kind of like why I moved on with electronic music as well because I wanted more variety with my sound and I didn't want to be confined with like a big drum, like lugging around a big drum set or a whole band. I wanted to be able to,
yeah,
yeah,
you can just run around with
yeah,
like a high force or an
mm,
MPC, and you can live perform on the
mm-hmm,
pads. You can be kicking off
mm-hmm,
clips, and then running beats and then singing over it
right,
live. Like Kanye West actually used to do
mm-hmm,
this a lot. People used to see what he used to do. He actually used to go out with like an
mm,
Akai MPC and then be kicking off clips and
mm-hmm,
rapping over it,
nice,
kind of like a DJ. But if you look at what those things are, it's like a grid based system, and you're just kicking off the clips, and you can be somewhat like improvisational with
mm-hmm, yeah,
It's kind of like a DJ with a Pioneer board, CDJ. You can do
Mm-hmm.
that with these grid-based systems, and they give you even more
Mm-hmm.
capability because you can have all this stuff kind of running, and you'd be kicking them off and then changing the order, so you could have a very authentic, not stale feeling set.
Right. It feels more live. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially on the grid-based systems that they have today, and they're not crazy expensive, and some of them don't require computers. They can be self-contained, and so you can have your whole song just on this one
Mm-hmm.
thing, carry it to the gig, go and
Nice.
do it, and then people are like, "Wow," because you can come in and you look pretty, you don't sound stale. You
Mm-hmm.
don't sound like you're just
Mm-hmm.
like phoning it in.
Right, right.
And I think that's the thing. Musicians don't want to be
Mm-hmm.
in a situation where they feel like they're phoning it in. They want to feel like they're part of it.
Right, right. I agree. Definitely.
Especially if you're a singer, you want to sing your song. You want to like lip sync your song. You want to sing it. You want to feel
Yeah.
it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely on my list. We're about to release a few more songs, a few more dance songs, with Evil Rocket
Evil
Ship.
Rocket Ship, and
Yeah,
you have a rapper you're working with, Kali Elijah.
yeah, Kelly Elijah. He's from Palm
Okay.
Springs. Yeah, he's a very talented rapper,
Those
and
songs coming out more in a mid-year.
hopefully early next year. But with Evil Rocket Ship, because we were actually shooting a video for the songs as well, and we want to release them as we release the video.
Oh, awesome!
So yeah, hopefully by spring or maybe before summer. But
So
you
you're
know,
waiting to kind of be able to tour it, because some people like they don't want to release it if you can't like do shows, or are you kind of like, okay, we're not gonna do shows, we're just gonna do videos. We don't need to do shows. Some bands are kind of stuck on the like
right?
they don't want to put it out if they can't actually go to the club and do it, because
Mm,
they think it's not going to be a good idea to put it out if I can't tour with it.
right. Well, not really. I mean, um, fortunately, like Evil Rocket Ship, they're okay. I mean, they've already done their whole, touring and playing live. So as long as they can just put out music and keep doing it and,
Okay, cool. So they're
shooting
not
videos.
stuck in that kind of speed. The video is good enough
No.
to get on YouTube. Yeah, to get out there.
Yeah, yeah. Just as long as they can, keep doing it, and I mean, I suggested definitely let's arrange it in a way where we can definitely play this live. That way, we can set up some shows and sell tickets.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're not opposed to the idea at all because one half of the group is actually a DJ. He DJs in San Diego regularly, and
So you
he's
should be able to do that. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. So that's on our list too. I'm not going to be opposed to playing my songs live for sure. I think that would be a good opportunity to experiment with, like you
That's a
said.
good thing. When I talk to musicians, like there is this consideration when you write a song
Hmm.
that like, how am I going to do this live? Like there's some songs
Right.
that if there's this history of songs, right? There's certain songs like, if you think about Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run, right? It's
Hmm.
layered in this Phil Spector way, where it's got like tons and tons of overdubs. Now his
Hmm.
band is big, so they can pretty much do it.
Right.
And he had a very big band, like
Hmm.
15-piece band, so they can pretty much do all the parts. But like
Hmm.
when you do something like that, and you're a 4-unit band, right, or a
Hmm.
3-person band, and you
Right.
do like 20 overdubs,
Hmm.
when you go to play that live, it's like you're not really going to be able to do that.
Right. I
So,
know. We got to figure out a way how we can do that. But,
well, there
I
are
mean,
ways today, but it kind of locks you into the sound if you have to run all the
hmm.
backing tracks.
Hmm.
Then when you go, then you're kind of if you go out there and you keep all your backing tracks, then you're kind
Hmm.
of locked into your backing tracks, which means you have
Right.
less freedom to riff.
To
So
control, yeah, to
yeah,
improvise on stage.
yeah. So you have to be really
Agreed,
tight,
yeah.
yeah, with the
That's
song, and
true.
like you got to be very tight on it, and you got to rehearse
Hmm.
it, and if you're more like a 4-piece rock band, you
Yeah,
could have your song, but if you go
hmm,
out there and the bass, drum, guitar player, another
that's
guitar player,
true.
you can kind of, okay, well, however you feel that night, you can get away with it. But with
Hmm.
some of the music today, you're kind of locked into it, and you gotta
Yeah.
know it.
Right. Yeah, that
you
is
know,
true. That is
it's a different
true.
type of thing.
Or maybe we can just have like a create like a 1 hour set where we can, create like a live version of whatever,
Yeah, I mean,
song we
a
choose
lot
to
of it is just
play.
kind of like how tight you want.
Right.
Yeah, I think you can riff anything.
Mhm.
I think if it's your music, it's your music, right? You
Mhm.
wrote it. If you feel like one night to do change a lyric here or there, or do a line there, or not do a line, or add a
Mhm.
line, or keep it going longer than what it was,
Mhm.
you're free to. I think that's why people go to see things.
Yeah, totally.
They don't want to see it because to get exactly the 2 minutes and 57 seconds.
Right.
They do it because they want somebody to actually. Maybe when I was a kid, I wanted to see Led
Mhm.
Zeppelin play that song different than what was on the record.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That was kind of, I want to see the Grateful Dead because I knew they were going to do a 20-minute
Mhm.
set on one
Right.
song.
Yeah. Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
but I don't know if kids are the same way today because some kids seem to like they want to hear it exactly the
No,
way they hear it on
I
Spotify.
mean, not at all because when I go to DJ shows, like when I go to electronic music shows, the DJ will he'll play all of these, they're called like VIP versions of the songs where you've never heard it
Is
anywhere. Like,
they chop it
yeah,
up. They
they
chop it up.
haven't released it anywhere. It could be like a 20-minute version of one song.
Well, that's cool. That's
Yeah, so
cool.
it's very exclusive. It's very, like they're very rare sometimes, and it's really like it's very interesting to hear that because you never kind of expect it. You'd think, oh, it's
That's the cool
electronic
thing about
music.
EDM.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
with
gets
EDM,
deep.
they then these really long kind of epics. That
Mm-hmm.
you can extend something and then change it. It's
Yeah.
kind of like the old, if you get into original hip hop
Mm-hmm.
that was on vinyl,
Mm-hmm.
people would take these funk records, these James Brown records, and Parliament records, and they kind of like riff them,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and then suddenly it became the rap, the original hip hop.
Nice.
There's all these funk grooves from like Earth, Wind and Fire and James Brown, and then they started riffing on top of
Mm-hmm.
them. And if you went to back in the day when I went to some of those shows, they're running on the turntable, doing two turntables, and they're
Mm-hmm.
mixing, Shaka Khan and Rufus, and then rapping something over it,
Right. Yeah.
or rapping something over Cool, Cool and the Gang. I mean, they just used to take a riff
Mm-hmm.
and then just like make it up, and that's kind of what
Yeah.
it is. But back then it was very organic, and it was like
Right.
on
Mm-hmm.
vinyl,
Wow.
and they were just, and there was cool stuff you could hear with the vinyl. It's a little different than the
Mm-hmm.
CDJs. Like in New York now, they actually have clubs where you have to have DJs that use vinyl
Yeah, I definitely,
because
yeah,
because they,
I've,
because there's a different
yeah,
sound.
yeah, in LA, when I go to clubs, there's definitely like an only vinyl room, and then there's a big stage for CDJs. But if you want to play in this one room, you have to know vinyl, otherwise you can't do it.
Yeah, you probably got some purists that want to go in there to hear that kind of old school.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't blame them.
But people can get whatever they want today. It's cool, It's like I go to New Orleans and go listen to
Mm.
blues because I'm big into the
Mm-hmm.
blues. But then I might go to New York like a CBGB's and listen to a punk
Yeah.
band. Like that CBGB's like punk, like a place like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's like to me, it's like I like every type of
Same.
music. I'll go listen to
Mm-hmm.
country. I'll go listen to rock. I'll listen to heavy metal. Listen to death metal. Whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
If it's cool, and if I'm into it, I'll go check it out.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the cool thing about music today because there's a lot of genre crossing,
Yeah.
and I see that in your music because like when you talked about like your original influence, your early influences, you had Alanis Morissette, and then
Mm-hmm.
Sade, and then Bob Marley, and
Mm-hmm.
then BeeGees, and Boyz II Men. So you've got like very, like really like
Mm-hmm.
R&B, big names like Toni Braxton and Mariah Carey, but then Alanis Morissette is kind of this
Right.
alternative kind of
Yeah.
rock.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a totally two different
Yeah.
sides.
Mm-hmm.
And then Bob Marley and the Wailers, that's a totally different genre of
Yeah.
music, reggae. Uh, and then your current influence, like Destructo and Rufus the
Mm-hmm.
Soul and Ferreck, Diamond, Bloodtone, it's cool because you're
Mm-hmm.
like, you're like the way what I like to see an artist is like very diverse
Yeah,
influence.
definitely. I mean, I remember when I would make my cousin a playlist because he's really big into music too. I'll just put all the genres in there. He's like, "What is this? I don't even know what's coming next." I'm like, "Don't blame
That's what's
me, you
cool.
know. Just hit random and see what happens." He's like, "Wow."
It's an education. I think it's people who limit themselves to any one genre, I think, are missing
I
out.
agree.
It's kind of like the whole thing with music is it's great to get into classical. It's great to get into jazz. I love jazz, and I'll get into
Mm-hmm.
bebop
Mm-hmm.
and Miles Davis and Coltrane. And people are like, there's some people that can't listen to jazz because they don't
Mm.
understand it, right?
Right.
They can't get
Mm-hmm.
into it at all.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it's just like
Oh yeah.
the musicianship in jazz is equal to like classical.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's the same kind of talent level,
Right.
and people either get it or they don't get
Mm-hmm.
it. But it's like it is kind of like a line
Mm-hmm.
where some people like they're never going to listen to
Mm. I
jazz,
mean, yeah.
especially avant-garde jazz.
Mm-hmm.
They just won't do it. But
Right. Well, I think, like what you said earlier, I mean, music is all about just kind of telling a story. So if you apply that listening ear to it and you're not, it might get rid of your blockage. Like, I will never listen to this or that. But, if you just kind of look at it as like when you would watch a show, oh, what's that
yeah,
show about? Or what's that song about? Like, uh, uh, that's kind of how I approach music. There's always something in there that, that they're trying to tell you, if you just listen hard enough. And which is like how I see, like when I listen to techno, some people are like, I can never listen to techno. I don't get it. I'm like, oh, it's very subtle. The differences can be really subtle, but very, very deep. Like if you follow the melody, if you follow the beat, if you follow just the atmosphere, even it takes you on this whole just
yeah. I just
cerebral
love
high.
use of, well, I like the use of the beats, like the drum
Mm-hmm.
machines. You know, people using like TV 303s and
Mm-hmm.
707s,
Mm-hmm.
909s, 808s, and then how they use them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because like a big thing about electronic music, you go back to like an 808 drum
Mm-hmm.
machine or a 707 or a 727 or all the different drum machines that are parts of like different
Mm-hmm.
genres, right? And like the Lynn drum machine associated with Prince, and then you got 707s with certain types of hip
Mm-hmm.
hop, and 808s and 909s. There's very specific machines that were associated with certain
Mm-hmm.
genres, because they have certain capabilities that actually, the DJs or the artists in those time
Mm-hmm.
periods use them to create iconic
Mm-hmm.
sounds that actually represent the whole genre.
Mm.
And it's a large part of like electronic music is like is understanding the
Right.
history of how those instruments created that
Right.
sound, like in disco,
Right.
like the use of the cymbals or the use of the
Mm-hmm.
drums. They create those kind of BG beats
Yes.
or the Diana Summer
Mm-hmm.
beats. They're very specific.
Mm-hmm.
Like the reason disco sounds the
Mm-hmm.
way it is what the drummers are doing.
Mm-hmm.
What the synth arrangements, like the string
Mm-hmm.
arrangements on like Donna Summer records and BG
Right.
records, there's a certain style. It's similar to like what you get in trance or EDM. It's a very specific
Right.
stuff that creates that
Yeah.
genre. And I think what's cool today, like in hip hop,
Mm-hmm.
you get artists that are
Oh
mixing
yeah.
jazz, and you have somebody that says they don't like
Mm-hmm.
jazz, but then if they listen to like some hip hop records, there's jazz
Yeah.
infused into it, and so they don't even realize they're actually listening to
Right.
jazz.
Right.
It's being infused into the hip hop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Some people, I think
So
also it's because some people just have an ability of fusing it really well where you don't even realize it. It's just nicely done, you know? And
well, I think that's the best compliment to a producer or a DJ is when they fuse it and the audience that says they don't like it
mm-hmm.
suddenly likes it. Then you actually
Right.
did your job.
Right. Right.
Because suddenly you've converted people into a
Mm-hmm.
style, and you probably love that. As a producer, you're probably like you're listening to all these
Mm-hmm.
records. I think as musicians, we've got all these
Mm-hmm.
influences. And we have our favorite things, and we kind of sneak them into the
Yeah,
music.
definitely.
Or we unconsciously do it or consciously put it
Mm-hmm.
in, hoping that we can get fans to convert
Mm-hmm.
to our way of thinking.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not always easy, but it definitely it feels great when people are just moved by what you're doing. I mean, sometimes I'll hear, you know, purists with house, like house music purists, they're like, oh, that's not even house. That's not even. I'm like, but if it makes you move, it makes you dance, then, you know, that's kind of cool, right? You know?
Well, because there's always something that made how did electronic music get into techno, get
Right,
into
right.
EDM, to get into trance, to get into psytrance? Somebody went and
Exactly. I
broke a
agree.
rule.
Yeah.
So it's nothing wrong with breaking the rule. I mean,
Right.
jazz is like that. I mean, fusion came out of bebop,
Mm-hmm.
and if you're a bebop guy, you're gonna say, well, fusion's that's not real jazz. But
Right.
like, okay, well, it comes out of
Mm-hmm.
bebop, and it was different than bebop, and so it would never exist if somebody didn't say, well, I don't want to do bebop
Right.
anymore.
Right. I kind of like, it's
So
kind of like, you know, it's kind of like food, right? Like when you say, oh, this is Mexican food and this is Chinese food. But if you can maybe find a way to fuse some flavors with some
yeah, fusion
dishes,
food, yeah,
you know, it
people want
could
it.
work. Yeah, it could work. I mean, you know, some
After you
purists.
get bored with the same recipe, the only reason why a new restaurant comes along is they come up with something different.
Right.
And I think as
Yeah.
musicians, we come up with a new
Mm-hmm.
recipe. We're like the
Mm-hmm.
chefs of sound. It's like you
Right.
figure out, it's like, okay, I'm gonna change this a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
suddenly the blues is now funk.
Right.
And then
Mm-hmm.
and then funk, is soul, and then soul is funk, and
Yeah.
then soul is new and neo soul.
Yep.
Somehow you come up with a new flavor, and then suddenly
Mm-hmm.
you've got like a whole new thing coming back. You get the
Yeah.
retro soul. You get people
Right.
trying to sound like the old, like Marvin Gaye. Trying to
Mm-hmm.
bring that back. You get people
Yeah.
like Amy Winehouse. She tried to
Mm-hmm.
bring back that kind of girl 50s group thing going on, like the Ronettes. She
Mm-hmm.
basically, in the modern age, brought back like Motown
Mm.
Ronette
With the hair.
girls group. Yeah, with her whole vibe was this very kind of Motown
Yeah.
girl group, and specifically
Mm-hmm.
a group like Phil. She
Yeah.
was channeling like the Ronettes with a
Mm-hmm.
modern kind of hip hop sound, but
Yeah.
having this 50s sound
Yeah.
in it, and
Mm-hmm.
it was just phenomenal. What
Yeah.
she was
Yeah.
able to do, because she
Mm-hmm.
is a hybrid of
Mm-hmm.
multiple things, and
Right.
that's how you get something new.
Mm-hmm. It was definitely refreshing. It's refreshing to see people who kind of take something from the past, but at the same time they are relevant because they apply a lot of, you know, the modern elements to it. And that's also how I think, you know, you're able to capture people's attention. Like you're very hard to ignore when you have some classic in you, but also some modern in you, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of your tracks, like I mentioned, Bloom and E11. But if it's Edge the Bass, that one I like the feel, because it's got that groove,
Yeah.
and I like how your lyrics integrated with
Oh
what
wow.
those guys are
Yeah,
doing.
yeah. That's awesome because
Yeah,
I
it's
mean when they just played it for me in the studio and they said, "Okay, we want you to do this." And it just happened so fast and you know the
sometimes it's good when that happens.
yeah,
Sometimes it's good
yeah.
not to overthink it.
Right. And then we just released it the week after and he said, "Oh wow, we just released a record." And we had just met, so I said, "I think we got something going here." And that's how we just kind of kept working together because when we're at the studio, we don't disagree, you know, we just kind of, oh,
Well, that's yeah,
mhm,
you click.
yeah,
That's a whole thing about a band.
right.
When you create a
Hmm.
band, it's because you
Yeah.
click. Like when you get a traditional rock band setup, like the Beatles or
Hmm.
the Eagles, or any of the big rock groups, right? It's because suddenly when you go in that studio and you come up with a track,
Hmm.
everybody's got the vibe and it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens with like lyricists and vocalists and
Hmm.
producers. When you've got the right team, it just
Yeah.
works.
Hmm.
And there's sometimes when you just like you keep on working on something because you're just dedicated. But I always find, just as a musician, playing for 25
Hmm.
years, the things that
Hmm.
they come easy. Sometimes you're like, well, that can't be good because it was so easy.
Yeah.
But that's not true, because sometimes like you pick up that vibe, and it is easy.
Hmm.
And sometimes those are my most true pure things you
That's
ever write,
true.
because they're not tortured and they don't take forever, and it just
Yeah,
happens,
organically.
you know, organically. And those things, people have a tendency, well, I need to work
Hmm.
harder. And there's a danger when you're a musician that you take something that the first 3 takes were the most honest takes. By the time you get to take
Yeah,
27, you kind of wrecked it.
definitely. Definitely. That's for sure happened.
You have to kind of know. You have to know which one is that. The early versions tend to be better.
Yeah, I agree. And sometimes when you're mixing too, you're just listening to it so many times you don't even know if it sounds good anymore. You're just like, okay, I'm over this. And I don't know. Sometimes I feel that way. Lucky, my sound engineer, he tells me don't overthink it, like once you hear
Yeah, yeah.
something that you like, just stick with it and that's it. Because the more you meddle with it, it's just probably you're just
Yeah, I think people ought to listen. I watched a documentary with Elton
hmm
John, and he's a big hit
hmm
maker, right? He said in the 70s, when he did like the Yellow Brick Road album, which has a bunch of his hits,
Yeah.
everything was like the second or third take.
Nice.
And he said it's like if we tried to do it more than that, it didn't
Yeah.
work.
hmm
And we kind of just believed in ourselves. You know what? If we can't get it on the second or third take,
Wow.
it's not meant to
Yeah.
be. And I think you have to kind of, as a musician, you got to get
hmm
to the point sometimes where you realize
hmm
that.
Yeah. You have to know when
And
to
I
stop.
think the musicians I've read about that are really got like a lot of really good songs seem to have run into this scenario where
Mm.
second, third takes tend to be like
hmm
the one that they
Yeah.
use.
Yeah. I mean, we also have a rule in the studio where after 4 hours, that's it, we're done recording because anything after that is probably just gonna sound tired or, just
Yeah, you got to burn it
yeah.
out. To me, you burn out the honesty. The whole thing
hmm
is like if you're a
hmm
poet, the first couple lines you
hmm
write are probably the most true thing that you
hmm
wrote. And then if you keep on revising it, you're actually taking the honesty
Yeah,
out of it.
that's true.
And I think with if you talk to painters and musicians and actors, it seems, and I've done interviews with the poets and actors, and they all kind of say the same thing. I had an actress from New York
hmm
City, and she said, if I do a bunch of takes, I always tell the directors like my first, second take is probably better
Yeah.
because I was really feeling it. If you keep on
Yeah.
making me redo it, I'm
The
gonna
feeling's
start
gone.
not being more robotic. Yeah, it's
hmm
gonna be more robotic, and it's not gonna have any emotion.
Yeah, I
You
agree.
know,
I agree. I was
you have to
recording.
come back the next day.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, you come back the
exactly.
next day.
You're just not satisfied with it anymore.
Yeah, it's better to take a break. I mean, I'd rather take a break from a song
hmm
and come back to it like 3 months later
hmm
or, a year later if I wasn't doing it and then reapproach it
Yeah.
than to go do it for 6 months just working on one track.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You get really tired
I
from that.
Yeah, I think there are people that kind of burn themselves out
hmm
doing it that way. And it's like, okay,
hmm
I mean, that's the way you choose to work. But I think it's better to just like,
hmm
try to be
hmm
as improvisational or kind of stream of
hmm
consciousness tends to really be closer to what the real
hmm
intention is. And then you can refine it
hmm
here and there. But a lot of real good work
hmm
is really, that universal thing that you got it. And a lot of people
Yeah.
feel guilty
hmm
that they got it. And they feel they got to work harder.
Mm.
And it's not something they actually have to
Right.
do.
I mean, for me, like I've been playing music mostly by ear, so I'm a big believer in that. Like I really play with feeling, and if my heart's not in it, I'm not gonna do it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, as a singer, I think you have to feel with
Yeah,
your
or
heart.
else it
Vocalists, I think,
translates in the microphone,
yeah,
it translates in the record for sure.
you got to feel it. Yeah, you totally got to feel it. If you're not feeling it, I don't know why you'd want to sit there
Right.
and spend hours if you're not feeling it.
That's very true. I've definitely like met, there's some managers that they're like, we want you to sing in this song and we want you to do this, but I just did I found more, excitement in kind of learning how to do it myself and creating my own sort of sound instead of, doing it for someone else who's already kind of made it for me. I'm like, that's cool, but I don't think that's why I do music, I think
Yeah, I think when you have your own vision,
yeah, that's
right,
exactly what it is.
it's hard to have somebody kind of take it
Mm-hmm.
over. And some people kind of subjugate their vision to
Mm-hmm.
somebody else because they want to get the
Right.
benefit of doing that. But then, is that your
Right.
sound,
Mm-hmm.
or are you doing somebody else's
Mm-hmm.
sound? I think to me as a producer, I have my
Mm-hmm.
own sound. right? And sometimes I'll link with somebody that I think is gonna make that
Mm-hmm.
sound better. But I never want to link with somebody I think is gonna make it
Or
sound
not,
not as good.
or not authentically you, like you're not feeling what
Yeah,
they make.
yeah. It's not me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna bend to be in their sound unless I want to go
Right.
that way.
Same here. Same here. That's why I think I just was really patient. I knew that if I just kept going and doing my own thing, I will find the people that are kind of on the same wavelength, and we can,
Yeah, you definitely
yeah,
found them on some of
yeah,
these tracks. You have found some people that you've got a really good synchronicity with. You've
I
got a
think
really good
so.
vibe on some of these tracks. Yeah, I look forward to your 2021 tracks because you have some really good stuff. I mean, I put them on repeat. I've got them on my favorite now.
Thank you.
So yeah, we're gonna actually put the link to your Spotify
Awesome.
because we're actually part of Spotify. Anchor FM is a Spotify company,
Nice.
and we're going to put the link to your main profile on
Hmm.
this episode. But
Awesome.
we also get published on 11 other platforms, including Apple
Nice.
and Google and many other ones like Radio Public and Overcast. So what happens when we publish, it goes out to 11 podcast platforms all at
Very
once.
cool.
And so then you'll see, we'll give you the link to the Spotify and the Apple and
Okay.
the Anchor. And if you go out to any of these other podcast companies like Overcast and Radio Public in the next day or two, they'll be out there. But immediately, Apple and Spotify and Anchor will have this podcast available within an hour.
Awesome. That's great.
And we're going to promote it on our Instagram channel. So what's cool is there's a highlight on Instagram that goes right to the Spotify
Hmm.
podcast. And Spotify podcast, what people might not realize, you don't have to have a Spotify subscription to listen to a Spotify podcast. So if you send somebody the link on Spotify, they don't actually have to be a subscribing member to actually listen
Great.
to it. They can listen to it without having a subscription, and they'll be able to hear it for
Nice,
free.
nice. I will be promoting it for sure.
But thank you for being on the show, because we love talking to indie musicians, and you have some really good work out here. We love to hear like your new music for 2021. If you want to have a premiere show to talk about your new tracks, when you have new tracks available, let us know. And we always schedule people to be on the show multiple times. We had some guests on 3-4 times. So yeah, if you've got some more stuff to push, more music to let everybody know about, we'll be glad to have you on in
Thank you so
2021.
much. Thanks for all your support. Definitely looking forward to releasing all this new music and getting to chat with you again. I learned a lot. It was such a pleasure.
Well, thank you for being on the show. Everybody go out to Baddcheeta on all streaming platforms, including Spotify, and check out our music. I'll be diving into it again after I jump off the show, but we'll be pushing this out within the next hour, so we'll send you a link when it's ready. Thank you very much for being on the show. Everybody go listen to Baddcheeta. Thank you for being on our program.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Right.